toxic relationships. Now, mom and dad, if you're watching from home, hi, hello, how are you? In regards to exes, I have none, so no, we do not need to talk about this at home. But today I am going to be addressing issues to do with toxic friendships in particular. But if you do have a toxic ex, if someone in the audience does have a toxic ex, well, sit back, relax, because you're going to be able to relate to this 100%. So let me paint you a picture. Let's say one day you want to make some sushi, and still why I choose sushi out of all the foods, I'm not quite sure myself, but we're going to go with it for today. So let's say that you want to make sushi and you want to make it yourself in your own kitchen. So you're going to need two simple ingredients. You're going to need your sashimi, you're going to need your rice. Let's say that they are laid out in front of you neatly in an organized fashion. So you take what you need, you assemble the ingredients together, and you have your sushi just like that. Very simple, very easy. I would assume I haven't actually made my own sushi before, so avid sushi makers, don't come for me, but let's just say that's relatively smooth running. Next, maybe you want to make some more, but this time imagine that your ingredients are not just laid out in front of you, but they are sort of scattered around the kitchen. So you're going to have to invest a bit more time and a bit more energy in like running around finding these ingredients, finding them in the right quantities, and assembling them to make what you need. So it's not the most convenient thing in the world, but it's not too bad overall. Next, however, let's say that you want to make more sushi still. I don't know, maybe you're just really hungry today, whatever. But this time, imagine that your ingredients are not only just scattered around the kitchen, but they are hidden away in different secret cabinets, hidden drawers, high areas, low areas, hard to reach places of the kitchen. And to make it worse, let's say that you have a really big kitchen. So this time it's no longer straightforward or simple or easy. You're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy into finding these simple ingredients. And it's so much more of a process for something that really should be very simple and very enjoyable. And because of this, you don't really see the point in it anymore, and you just give up midway. Now you must be asking, well, what's the point of this entire description that I've given you? Well, those descriptions are representations of the different stages of a toxic relationship. So what I mean by that is, first it starts out easy and smooth, and this makes sense. This makes a lot of sense because most of the time a toxic relationship does actually start from a friendship. And this makes sense again because, well, you wouldn't really be attached to someone who you never really had any good times with or good memories with. And in fact, to confirm this, I did a survey of my own. To which 90.8% responded saying that they, in their own toxic relationships, actually started as friends, which confirmed my idea. And because they started as friends, this also means that there are feelings of guilt and self kind of blame involved in this as well. And this is because, well, you were friends with this person, so you kind of feel like bad about double guessing your relationship with them. And so you might feel guilty, you might blame yourself, you might have feelings like, am I oversensitive? Am I overthinking this? Am I the toxic friend? All of these feelings bundled up into your tiny body. And, well, in my survey, I once again asked people to see if this was just me, or if it was applicable to all or most relationships, to which 70.8% of people responded saying that usually, if not always, they did in fact experience these feelings in their own toxic relationships. What I was interested in most is well, you know that a toxic relationship stems from a friendship, and you know those two are correlated. But what I wanted to know was what causes that jump between a toxic relationship and a friendship. Because a lot of the time you'll be thinking to yourself and you'll be huddled up in this little ball of fear, maybe at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you'll think, well, why is my life so terrible? I don't want to be friends with this person anymore. Inevitably, at some point, you're going to ask yourself the question, why can't things go back to the way that they were before? Now, the problem with this question is that it makes you fixate so much on the past memories of a certain person and the good times that you shared with a certain person in the past, that you completely invalidate your concerns that you are experiencing now, what you are feeling now, and how you're currently doing with this person. So to explore what causes this and explore what causes these feelings and what causes that jump between a friendship and a toxic relationship, once again, in my survey, I asked people to put down the main causes of toxic relationships for them, and let's just take a quick look at that now. So, coming in at number 1, the number 1 cause of toxic relationships as voted for by the people is, drumroll please, poor communication. Now, there are also runner-ups to this, and in second place, close second, we have actually tied. We have not 1 but 2. We have manipulation and not being able to express yourself. And last but not least, in third place, we have, again tied, we have jealousy and being left out. Now, these are not very fun things to be going through, and that goes without saying, but unfortunately, this isn't even half of it. Because to this, in my survey, people were adding in the others section their own personal experiences that may not have been one of the options that I had listed. And they were saying that they had experienced lies, misconceptions, blackmail, peer pressure, all of these horrible things. At the same time, however, it's these same people, 90.8% of these same people, that said that this relationship in which they experienced all of these things started as a friendship. And you can begin to see now why it's so disorienting for so many people. Well, because people don't easily form a connection between something that was so strong and something that's now unhealthy or detrimental to one's mental health. Therefore, to understand this a bit better, I created a system of my own, if you could call it that, and this system allows you to quantify certain insights that you have about a relationship and place it on a scale that would allow you to orient yourself in terms of that same relationship. In retrospect, that's kind of a strange thing to do, to just go home and say, I'm going to orient myself in terms of my relationship, I'm going to create a system about it. A pretty strange thing to do. I don't think a lot of people do that. But at the time, my IGCSE exams were freshly canceled, so I ended up creating this system because due to boredom and I had nothing to do. So I created this system, and basically it has 2 layers. And these 2 layers are very creatively named Layer 1 and Layer 2. Wow, I know, I'm a genius. But, so Layer 1, let's talk about that first. Layer 1 represents the other person, and it represents how they are treating you. Are they genuine about being friends with you? Are they sincere? Do they care? All of these kinds of things, and you can place this on a scale of -2 to +2. -2 meaning that, well, they're just an overall toxic, abusive friend that doesn't care about you and is hurting you intentionally, and +2 meaning either one of 2 things. It could mean that they're just an overall great friend and they're just being a really good friend and they're nice to you and everything's okay. Or it might even mean that maybe they're not being the best friend that they could be being in that point of time, but you know that that's not, if you communicated with them, they would change that behavior. They're not trying to hurt you intentionally. So Layer 2, on the other hand, is about you, and it's about how you perceive that relationship. And more specifically, it's about your answer to the question, do I want to continue this relationship? And, well, you could have various different answers, but you can place it on a scale again. And -2 would mean, no, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, a firm no, and a +2 would mean, well, yes, I'm optimistic, I want to continue with this. Now, the general rule for this system is that when there's a greater numerical difference between the 2 values, if there's a greater disparity between them, that is indicative of a more toxic relationship. So let me give an example. In the 6th grade, and keep in mind this was in the 6th grade, so it's like very petty and anyways. In the 6th grade, I had a friend, and for today, we are going to call him Gilbert. So, Gilbert and I were friends in the 6th grade because we met through home base, and that's how we got to know each other. But before that, however, I had my own stable friend group, and I was really happy with that group. And one day, he kind of just joined our little lunch table, and that was fine at the time because, as I said, we were friends. So if we were to look at that in terms of this system, you could say that the layer 1 and 2 values were aligned at the more positive end of the spectrum, meaning that, well, he was nice to me and I wanted to continue being friends. However, as time went on, I felt a shift in layer 2, meaning that I felt that he was behaving differently, and this was because I felt that he was trying to separate me from my old friends. And this came through in the form of little comments, condescending remarks, things like that. Nothing really big, but because these things were being left unaddressed, they were accumulating and they were snowballing into something way bigger. And therefore, there was a shift in layer 2, and it was moving towards the more negative end of the spectrum. Meanwhile, layer 1, we could say, stays the same. And the reason I say this is because, as I briefly talked about earlier, I can assume that there's no real malicious intent there. I don't think he meant anything bad. I can assume now, with new knowledge, that maybe he was insecure about being new to the group. Maybe he was out of place and those things were underlying his actions. Nevertheless, it was having a damaging impact on me, and therefore, for simplicity, let's say at the end of that, the layer 1 value is at a 2, layer 2 values is at a -2, and the difference between those two values is obviously 4, and you can see just visually they're at the opposite ends, the polar ends of the spectrum, which is indicative of a highly toxic relationship, for 6th grade standards anyway. And now I know that's a lot of information, and I know that's a lot of numbers, and there are lots of complexities to it. So, to make it easier, I like to think of it in terms of the sushi. So, the sushi system goes hand in hand with this, and basically it's the same thing. You could say that the rice and the sashimi represent layer 1 and 2, and you could say that when they are closer together, meaning like in the beginning, as I said, if they're laid out in front of you, it's easier to collect your ingredients, assemble them, make your sushi, whereas if they're further away from each other, that is representative of a more toxic relationship, or generally just a more energy-consuming, time-consuming relationship, because you're needing to gather your ingredients, put them together. So yeah. Now, if we look at my relationship with Gilbert with that in mind, at first, when we were friends, you could say that the sushi layers, the sashimi and the rice, were close together, so it was a manageable relationship. However, as time went on and I started picking up on these comments, these things, and they were accumulating due to poor communication, they were building up, and you could say at this point that the layers of the sushi were separating more and more. And now the reason they kept separating and they kept getting more and more distant from each other is because, as I said, poor communication, and it's because the communication that was happening from my end was an unhealthy form of communication, because what I would do is post a shady Instagram or Snapchat story and hope that that would subtly convey the message to him without me necessarily needing to talk to him face to face. So I'd be posting something like this. And there are a few minor problems with this. Number 1 being that it's a teeny weeny bit immature. It's not really the best way to go about it. Furthermore, it's also not very helpful because things are getting lost in translation, and it creates a room for a lot of misunderstanding. And the message might not get across at all. It might get across and it might be distorted in a way, or if it does get across, it might come off just mean, and they might not feel comfortable talking to you about it. So it's not a very healthy form of communication. So what could you do instead if you don't want to do this? Well, here are some alternatives. Ideally, you should be talking to the person, but if you're anything like me, that's always the furthest thing from your mind. You're not really excited about just telling someone that I think you're a toxic friend, please stop. That's not really an exciting conversation to have, and I understand that. So, ask someone for an outsider perspective if that perspective is available to you, because sometimes you need information from someone who's removed from the situation to tell you something that's going wrong that you might have not recognized earlier because it's grown so innate to you. And if either of those options are not available to you, well, I suggest making a speech about toxic relationships and presenting it in front of your school. Because let me tell you, the things that certain people say about you and your speech without knowing anything about it, without knowing anything about the context of your speech, is truly mind-blowing and eye-opening even. You might get to know some new information that you wouldn't have known before. But anyways, continuing with the story, one day, Gilbert's computer broke down. And you might be asking, well, why is that relevant to the story? And that's what I thought at the time, because there could be so many causes of a computer breaking down. It could be a virus. It might be that, I don't know, it dropped in water. I'm not a very techie person, but dropped in water, dropped on the floor, things like that. There could be so many reasons. But what he told the grade was that I sat on his computer and therefore my weight broke his screen. In the 6th grade, this was a very big accusation to be throwing around. And to add on to that, the plot thickens because he made it seem like he was doing me a favor by not making me pay for the damages, by not making me pay for that new computer. And at this point, the sashimi was chilling somewhere in a fish market in Tokyo, and the rice was in a wheat farm in Vietnam. And I was in the middle of it, and I had a very simple response to this. I said no. So that was the end of our relationship. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it ended again, 6th grade, but that was one of the leading causes. But what if I told you that there's something missing from this relationship, something missing from this system? Because, well, when I created this system and when I used it to look at this relationship, when I used it to look at other relationships and analyze them and try to get a better understanding of them, I thought I'd hit the jackpot somehow and created some sort of revolutionary, life-changing system that I could publish into a book, that I could become the next big social media influencer, a lifestyle guru even. And there are a few problems with that train of thought that I had. Number one being that a little bit of narcissism and superiority complex is evident from it, but most importantly, this system is fundamentally flawed. And that's kind of counterintuitive because I've spent the past, 12 to 15 minutes talking to you about it. However, I say that it's flawed because it only allows you to look at a relationship in terms of my relationship is this toxic, your relationship is that toxic, my relationship is more toxic than yours, toxic, toxic, toxic. My point is, it only allows you to look at a relationship in terms of toxicity. Whereas really a healthier approach to it would be, and I've made this mistake, so I'm learning from this as well, it would be to look at a relationship in terms of growth, in terms of a scope for improvement. Because at the end of the day, it's so easy to break a relationship up, but it's so hard to preserve it. And what I don't want the takeaway message to be from today's talk is that you should find a relationship, find a minor inconvenience, say that you're upset, and deem it a toxic relationship and leave. That's not what I'm trying to preach here. I think that it's important to have good communication in any relationship, because any relationship will not be perfect and it will require good communication and compromise. And you don't want, at the end of the day, to be 3 months down the line thinking, oh, I could have done this differently. You don't want that regret burning in your mind. And worst comes to worst, if it's not working out, well, at least you've tried, first of all. But secondly, you don't owe anything to your own Gilbert. You don't owe anything to a piece of sushi, definitely. And in the wise, wise words of the great intellect, legendary philosopher, and futuristic thinker, Elsa, let it go. Thank you, everyone.